Today, we're going to dig into two common behaviors that might be trauma responses: hyperindependence and hyper-responsibility. Now, while these might seem like strengths, they might look like strengths from the outside, might even feel like strengths, they can also be signs of deeply rooted wounding from your childhood. If you feel like you always have to go it alone, or you're always responsible for everything, or if you feel like everyone's happiness is your responsibility, you might be struggling with hyperindependence and or hyper responsibility. We're going to get into those today. We're going to talk about how they show up even in your adult life, but most importantly, we're going to talk about how to begin to heal. Hello and welcome to the Pause First Academy channel. I'm Kim Colgrove. Let's start this discussion by defining these terms. So we're talking about hyperindependence and hyper-responsibility and how they might be trauma responses and how they might be impacting you in your adult life. So I've been teaching stress reduction strategies and resilience practices for many, many years professionally. And for the past 7 or 8 years or something like that, I've been working exclusively with trauma exposed professionals. So, first responders, veterans, and others in these helping professions that are exposed to trauma or the trauma of others. And I've learned a lot about how these trauma responses that we develop in childhood can creep into our adulthood and really negatively impact us. So I'm going to pull from my most recent book that I wrote two books as a result of my work with veterans and first responders. Prior to that, I taught these things in more in corporate settings. And what's happening now is I'm finding that some other groups are starting to step forward and wanting this kind of information, this kind of training. So, nurses and court reporters, mental health professionals, social workers, groups like that. And really, I'm starting to feel like maybe it's time for me to start to kind of get back to my roots, where I just focus on stress reduction, resilience building, teaching the practices that I use and that I've taught for years: breathing, meditation, mindfulness, things like that, and just open it up to everybody because really this information is important for anybody and everybody, no matter what your profession. So I'm going to pull from my most recent book, which is Wellness Warrior Style. And in my books, across these books, I've interviewed about 24 people. And I'm gonna just talk briefly about one of the interviews that I did for this more recent book, and it is I think it's chapter 7, and it's my interview of Ashley, and it's where she talks about her childhood and how she had to basically parent her own mother, and how that led to a lifetime of hyper independence and hyper responsibility. So, first, I'm going to define these two behaviors. And then on the other side, we're going to talk about some real world examples of how you might have developed hyper independence or responsibility, and where that would stem from and how it might be showing up now. But first, let's just define these. So, hyper independence. I say in my book on page 156, hyperindependence is a stress response that causes people to feel they must make decisions and accomplish things without the support of others. Some signs of hyperindependence are difficulty trusting others, delegating to others, and forming close or long-term relationships with others. I have another definition here that I jotted down earlier, and I'm just going to go ahead and read that to you too. Hyperindependence is an extreme form of self-reliance, where individuals avoid asking for help or won't even accept help when it's offered, even when they genuinely need it. It's often a response to past trauma where relying on others led to disappointment or harm. So that's hyper independence. Now let's define hyper responsibility. They're similar and often there's overlaps. So in my book, I say Hyperresponsibility, also known as inflated sense of responsibility or hyperresponsibility syndrome, is a belief or a cognitive bias by which a person feels they are personally responsible for people and events outside of their control. Okay? So, those of us who feel responsible for everybody and everything in one way or the other, it might be responsible for their physical needs, it might be responsible for their emotional needs, or a combination, but for people who always feel responsible for others. And then the definition that I jotted down here is I pulled up these other definitions just so we could kind of have a wide array of explanation about these behaviors. Okay, let's see. Hyper-responsibility involves an inflated sense of duty where individuals feel responsible for others' emotions, actions, or well-being, like I said. This can stem from environments where they were made to feel uncomfortable. Where they're made to feel accountable for things beyond their control. So, children who were made to be age inappropriately responsible before they were actually ready. And sometimes, if that was baked into our childhood, we carry that into adulthood. Okay, now let's talk about some real world examples. Again, I jotted some things down so that I wouldn't forget anything. So I'm going to read from what I jotted down before I got started. So some examples would be a child who grew up in a household where their needs weren't met, their needs were neglected, or if they expressed their needs, they might be shamed or even punished. As an adult, they become hyper independent, meaning that they really feel that it's safer to rely on themselves than to try and rely on someone else. In other words, when I was a kid, I couldn't rely on anybody and nobody took care of me. I had to take care of myself. And so that just gets baked in. I don't need anybody. I take care of myself. All right. Ringing any bells with anybody? Let's see, what else did I jot down here? Oh, also any child who grew up in a household where there was role reversal, where the child had to either be overly responsible, maybe for younger siblings, but sometimes even for the parent. It's really common in households where there's a parent with an alcohol problem or an addiction of some kind, that the child sometimes has to take over the caretaker role, or even like the responsible adult role for the parent that should be in that role. So I mentioned in this book Ashley's story, which is a very moving story, and she shared it so openly and vulnerably. And I'm just going to read one paragraph from her story that really backs up what the definitions and the real world examples that I was just talking about. So, Ashley describes her childhood as negative, dysfunctional, and traumatic. She had a very abusive mother who was married 7 times and was both neglectful and abusive. Ashley was forced to be the adult in the household, and as a result, she became hyper independent, something she still grapples with today. She also felt overly responsible at a very young age, not only for herself, but for everyone and everything around her. Another issue she says she's still working through. So, if this is ringing any bells with anybody, I want to tell you why it is that I'm bringing this up today and why I wanted to talk to you about this. I learned so much in my first 4 years of therapy. So, I didn't start therapy until I was like close to 40 or around 40. I had never had any kind of therapy before then. And there's a lot of stuff going on in my life at that time that I needed a little counseling or a little help with. I loved therapy. I know it's not for everybody, but I will tell you, once we got into the childhood stuff for me, it was such an eye opener because I had spent most of my life. Now, I knew some of what I lived as a child was extremely dysfunctional. I mean, clearly I was aware of that. But I was really programmed to just give everyone a break and, just forget about it and just forgive them and just move on and just do better. And so I got really, really focused on being a really good mom and doing all the things that nobody ever did for me. And I couldn't wait to get married and have kids and have a family and have a home and do all the things that I thought meant good parenting. What ended up happening is I did that. I definitely did that, but I overparented in some ways. And, down the road, when my children were older, I realized that a lot of what I did as a mother, I was trying to give my children what I felt was missing from my childhood, the things that nobody did for me. And instead of really listening to and watching and reading my children and making sure I was giving them really what they needed. So I was kind of trying to, I think, kind of parent that inner child in me, I guess, by doing, all these things. And a lot of my ideas and my ideals about parenting and a husband-wife relationship, raising children, and mothering, a lot of those ideals, I'm just going to be honest, came from watching a lot of television as a kid and movies. There were certain television shows and movies when they depicted a happily married mom and dad with kids, and the mom who took good care of her kids and loved her kids, and the dad that the kids could go to for all of his wise advice, and the pretty and clean house and the pretty yard and just all those things, the white picket fence, all of that. As a child, I didn't realize until, as an adult, and I'm looking back and I start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But as a child, I drew from those television shows and those movies, and that's what I used to decide how my adult life was going to be. So I was a stay-home mom for 15 years, and I did all the things. And along the way, I made a whole set of my own mistakes. I guess that's what tends to happen. But that's another real world example of how you carry things into adulthood. And because in my childhood, I felt mostly pretty incidental to everybody, and there was definitely some role reversal that happened, and not feeling like I really had a foundation and or that I was anchored. And honestly, if I'm just honest, knowing that I really wasn't wanted, that was part of it because I was born to teen parents, like no fault of their own, right? But it was clear throughout my entire childhood because I don't know why, but the adults in my life told me the stories about how, nobody wanted me. And by the time they were all telling me that, my grandparents, I knew they loved me, knew my grandparents loved me, but that weird thing to tell a kid, but that stuck with me, right? So then when I had kids, I was gonna make damn sure they knew I wanted them and ta da 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 da. So enter some over mothering. Anyway, enough about me. I'm just telling you that to bring in some real world, real life examples. I will say, I'm almost 59 years old now, and I understand because I've done a lot of inner work, and it's not to say that it doesn't bubble up sometimes in certain circumstances, the emotions and the hyper independence, or hyper responsibility, because I really graduated from high school. I was 17, and I've really been on my own since then. Um, so it bubbles up sometimes. I'm not like perfectly perfect by any stretch, but I do see things through a clearer lens now, and I realize that being born to teen parents, they had a whole set of their own problems, and of course I can realize that they had, problems and issues with their own parents too. And also I know for a fact that um, they didn't do any of this on purpose. They didn't. None of the harm that I ended up, feeling or experiencing, that they didn't. Neither one of them, nobody around me, did that on purpose. They didn't mean to hurt me in that way. So I'm telling you all of this because I'm hoping I can inspire some people to introspection. Sometimes we go through life and we want things to change, we want things to be better, but we're always looking externally for them to change and that to change, for people to change, circumstances to change. And we can't control any of that, but we do have sovereignty over what goes on inside of us once we do a little self reflection, a little introspection, some self exploration. And all of that can increase your self awareness. And once you understand this stuff and you understand how it got locked in, and you start to realize how it's impacting your life, then you can start to make some changes. That's when you can start to heal. Okay, next, let's talk about how these behaviors can impact us in adulthood. So let's do a little transition here from their roots in childhood trauma to how you carry them into adulthood. So if you had a childhood that caused you to feel the way I've been explaining, if you experience some of the things that I described in terms of not feeling well taken care of, feeling that you didn't have anyone to count on, feeling that you were responsible for people or for the happiness of others, those kind of things. Um, what those were for you as a child, they were coping mechanisms, coping mechanisms. You were desperately trying to keep yourself emotionally safe and maybe actually physically safe. But those coping mechanisms can be kind of become anchors around our neck in adulthood. So I lost my place here. Oh, here we go. Again, I jotted some stuff down because I didn't want to forget anything. So something that was once a coping mechanism and you really did need it and it really did help you to survive. If you hang on to those into adulthood and then you begin to apply those behaviors with every other friendship and relationship that you encounter, now they can become maladaptive behaviors and can really hamstring you in adult life. So hyperindependence that kind of saved you as a child can lead to difficulty forming close relationships in adulthood, reluctance to seek support, and increased stress and burnout, chronic stress, anxiety, all kinds of mental and emotional issues, all in the name of being strong and resilient, self sufficient, and self reliant. Hyper responsibility, these two kind of overlap a little bit. Hyper responsibility can lead to feelings, chronic feelings of like guilt and anxiety, neglecting one's own personal needs, putting everybody ahead of yourself, so busy taking care of everybody that you don't take care of yourself, like you're not even on your own list. And all of this can lead you to attract codependent relationships. I almost cringe to say that, but it's really common that we get into codependent relationships when we carry these behaviors into our adult life from childhood. People who had childhoods like this and developed these coping mechanisms, a lot of times they become our fixers, savers, rescuers, healers sometimes because they are drawn to professions where they look after or take care of or are responsible for others. Why? Because that's a skill set for them. That's a skill set that has been developed and they can apply it to their professional life. And so you can see, if you kind of follow the bouncing ball here, you can kind of see how after some time that could become extremely draining and depleting. Okay, now let's talk about recognizing these patterns or excavating these behaviors because until you do a little introspection and examine what's been going on inside of you and take an assessment of your behaviors and your choices and your levels of hyper responsibility or or hyper independence until you take a look at that, until you take a look inside and do an assessment. You might not be able to heal it. You might not, have the context or the information or the insight that you need to take some steps to heal these things and improve, bring some balance to these things so that you can live a healthier, happier, more peaceful life moving forward. So, what we're going to use in order to kind of take a peek inside, I want you to think of things like self-reflection, self-assessment, self-awareness. All right, we're gonna we're gonna take a look at ourselves. It's really common when you identify that you might have a repeating pattern or something that's bothering you or something that's causing you mental or emotional stress or strife or issues. It's really common to look for external reasons for those things. What's less common, but so important, is the ability to look inward to see what's going on. All right. So I'm just going to ask you to find some time where you can kind of sit with yourself. Maybe you want to, practice a few mindful moments where you just kind of breathe and settle down and you're in a quiet space where you won't be interrupted. And maybe you even want to have pen and paper so you can journal or jot down anything that arises as you think this through. But I jotted down a list of questions that I would encourage you to ask yourself as you do a little self-exploration to determine, whether you're someone who is struggling with hyper independence or hyper responsibility. So I would recommend asking yourself these questions. And if you want to jot these down as we go along, feel free to grab a pen and paper and jot these down. You can always rewind and replay if you miss anything. So, do I feel uncomfortable asking for help? That would be the first question that I would ask myself if I were you. I was well into adulthood before I realized that I was a person who really struggled to ask for help. I have a hard time delegating anything. And, um, you know, are you that person who, let's say, you're moving and you're in your driveway with a whole couch on your back, walking through your driveway towards your moving truck, trying to move that couch by yourself. Obviously, this is a little bit of an exaggeration. And your neighbor comes out and says, "Hey, neighbor, can I help you move that couch?" And you go, "No, no, I'm fine." So not only do you not ask for help, but when someone offers help and you need it, you won't accept it. Took me a long time to realize, and I still struggle with that. I literally, there's been so many times, even in the past decade, when I'm in my 50s, where, there was something, a big project or something really overwhelming, and people around me offered to help. And I would, no, 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 I'm fine, which is ridiculous because, we're pack animals. We're built for like community and connection and helping each other and accepting help. That's all part of the healthy human experience, right? Okay, so do I feel uncomfortable asking for help? Do I feel uncomfortable accepting help? That would be the next question. Do I often feel responsible for other people's feelings? Do I often feel responsible for other people's feelings? I can tell you I have a toxic trait of kind of reading the room, and especially if I'm with someone who might not be, like the very positive, upbeat, bubbly kind of a person. I feel a responsibility on a weird level to bring levity to every situation, to make sure everybody's having a good time. I'm uncomfortable if I'm in a restaurant with a few friends, and if somebody seems grumpy or isn't nice to the server, I'll overcompensate for that person. So think about those kind of things. Are you someone who feels like you're responsible for other people's feelings, or like you're responsible for making sure everyone in your world is happy? Do I neglect my own needs to care for others? This is really common. You take care of everybody else. You make sure everyone else has everything they need all the time. You might be that person at home and your friend group at work, but you don't give yourself that same grace. you're not good about taking care of your needs in that way. You might not even be on your list. And because of how you're built, you might attract to you people who also don't take care of you. Even though you're taking care of them, they don't take care of you. Or if they try to, you reflect it or you reject it. All right, just some things to think about. And lastly, do I feel like there's nobody I can count on, lean on, or depend on? This is something that I still grapple with. I've grappled with a ton in life. I grappled with it a ton in life, realizing, I've lived an entire lifetime struggling and feeling like I don't have a foundation, like I don't have a foundation, roots, an anchor. And then when there have been people that have come into my life that have been like nurturing and caretaking, I don't know what it is. I tend to kind of deflect it. Maybe I don't trust them. Maybe I don't trust that they'll stick around. So, like, why get it started? Some things like that. So, I can't believe how much I'm telling you guys about myself. I might have big regrets here, but I don't know how else. I don't know how else to have a real conversation about things that are really important and that might be really hamstringing your life without sharing personal stories and saying, "Me too, me too. I work on all of this stuff. I do, and I try to be the healthiest person that I can be, but it comes up sometimes when I'm with certain family members or in a deep, quiet conversation with close, trusted friends. And I'll think, I handled that, I dealt with that, I healed that. And then here comes another layer of emotion around it. So, anyway, way more than you needed to know about me. But, you know, sometimes it's easier to connect with someone when they're real and honest, than when people try and teach you things or share information, acting like they're the perfect paragon of perfection, sitting on their perfect white tower. I ain't that, let me tell you. Okay, moving on. Now let's talk about healing because that's the point of this whole entire conversation. Awareness, examination, and then healing. So first, I'm going to recommend therapy. Now wait before you turn off the video. You know, I know therapy is not for everybody, and it might not be for you, and that's okay. I have always enjoyed therapy. I've always gotten a lot out of it. I understand it's not for everybody. The other thing I understand is that not everybody has access to therapy or counseling. If you don't have health insurance, or if you do have health insurance but you can't afford the copay, or it's very limited, there are many other reasons other than being afraid to open up and talk about people or just thinking it's a waste of time. There are many other reasons why people can't seek therapy or counseling, and I understand that. I would say if you are open or interested to even experiment with counseling or therapy, that maybe you could look into your community mental health center and see if there anything available for you there. But first, I'm going to, so that's my first recommendation. If you can, and if you're open to it, and if you have the wherewithal and the resources, I recommend therapy. If you can't do that right now for any reason, the next thing I'm going to recommend is that you just start to explore some of the topics that we're discussing today. So you can do that with a Google search. There's a lot of great information here on YouTube. So you can just use your internet browser and research some of these topics. Maybe just research hyper independence or hyper responsibility and read some articles. Maybe look for some books. I want to remind everybody that a library is still a thing. A library card is free. And so you could get a library card maybe and go find some books that talk about these topics and how to heal from these topics. How to heal from a difficult or a traumatic childhood, and go check out some books. Where I live, we have used bookstores. Like we have Half Price Bookstore and some other used bookstores, so that's another option. And if you're an avid reader and you're used to going to Barnes and Noble or whatever is still around you, or ordering from Amazon, wherever you get your books, then maybe you find some books. Get focused on these topics, kind of get pointed in that direction, And if you don't like to read, you're not a reader, then maybe you find a podcast or a couple of YouTube videos, things you can listen to, things you can watch, educate and inform yourself on these topics. I hope if this lit some things up inside of you, if you thought, oh my gosh, this is me. I hope you won't just walk away from this video and do nothing. This is what I always say to people. The one thing I don't want you to do is nothing. Please don't do nothing. Is that confusing? Don't do nothing. Let's do something. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I jotted down some things I didn't want to forget. So, first, therapy or learning, educate, and inform yourself. Um, Now, the next thing I'm going to talk to you about is like self-help, So self-help books, podcasts, videos, articles, however you like to get that, um, however you like to get that type of information. But there are also some self-help, self-care strategies. So self-help is one component of this. Self-care is another component. Now, I'm talking to a group of people. If you're still with me and you know what I'm talking about, then you are in this group of people that probably is not great about self-care. And I'm really talking to you about you can take a bubble bath and eat some dark chocolate and that kind of a thing. That's fine. Do that. Go get a massage. But what I'm really talking to you about is mental and emotional self-care, self-love, self-acceptance. And so one thing you could look into to kind of open the doors to this would be self-compassion. Self-compassion. Just first giving yourself a break. Giving yourself the same level of compassion that you give to all these people you take care of and you stand up and step up for. Self-compassion can be very difficult when you struggle with these issues because a lot of us that had bumpy childhoods, part of what those bumpy childhoods leave us with is not feeling loved, not feeling wanted, not feeling accepted, maybe feeling neglected or abandoned, but not feeling loved. And when you don't can't trust that the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, that would be your parents. If you can't trust that your parents loved you unconditionally or loved you at all, maybe you're not sure. And then you get into adulthood and you start learning about um, you, you start learning about things like self-help and self-care and maybe you do a little spiritual exploration of it or you do a little counseling and you start to hear about self-love and how self-love is so important and you can't truly love someone until you love yourself and how you have to work on your self-love. You start hearing these things and you may have an aha moment at some point, and I did, and that was, wow, if you can't trust that the very people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, if you're not sure they love you, then how are you supposed to love yourself? Because if your parents don't love you and didn't want you, or whatever that was, neglected you, abused you, whatever it was in your life, um, then am I unlovable? I'm very, very lucky because I had surrounding people in my life. I had, grandparents. I had, a stepmom that was present. And so, uh, you know, hopefully you had some of those surrounding people or someone in your life that helped you to understand that you were loved. If you didn't, then this can be a mountain to climb. I'm just being honest. It can be a mountain, but you gotta climb the mountain. You've just got to take the first step or couple of steps or 3 steps up that mountain. You have to because no one else is going to do this for you. And I promise, just by virtue of being here on this planet, you are loved. You are worthy. You are valuable. Every single being on this planet is. There are redeeming factors about every human being on this planet. Okay? So you've got to get focused on maybe first self-compassion, self-understanding, and then kind of, dip your toe in the pool of self-love. So there's something else for you to focus on. Again, any of these terms that I use, you can just Google And also, you can reach out to me if I can help you find any resources that'll help you along this path. Um, okay, so this might be like it might be a little early to mention this one because first you want to do some work on yourself. But on this path, you do want to get focused on and start thinking about looking for, seeking out, and working to attract relationships that are more supportive than the ones that you maybe have had in the past. So, supportive relationships, healthy, supportive relationships. So, that would be something to put on your radar. And, maybe this conversation leads you to an examination of the relationships that you have right now. Are they codependent? Are they healthy? Um, are there healthy boundaries? And that's another focus. That's something else you can think about. Do I possess the ability to set healthy boundaries? And if you don't, then that would be another piece that you can explore and look into setting healthy boundaries. It's good for everybody. Okay. Um, and then the last thing that I'm going to talk about is building or rebuilding your resilience inner reserves, your inner reserves of resilience. Now, don't get resilience twisted because if you're someone who struggles with hyper independence, hyper responsibility, then you probably view yourself and other people probably view you as pretty dang resilient. And you might even wear it as a badge of honor. I mean, I have forever. I've used the term, I've said things like I'm stupidly resilient, meaning I'm really, really very, but it is kind of stupid to be so, to be so proud of being so resilient. Like I don't need nobody kind of a thing. But I am resilient. I mean, I'm a person you kind of can drop me anywhere and I'll find my way home, or you can like drop me into the middle of any problem and I'll figure it out. And so therefore, people come to me in my life to help them figure out problems because I set it up that way. And I'm proud of that and I'm glad I can take care of myself and I'm glad that people, think that I'm capable and come to me, to help them solve problems. Um, but so let's soften this idea of resilience a little bit. So it's not just about being tough, like taking a punch and getting back up. There's more to it. And the way that you can build your own internal resilience reserves is really focusing on self-care, your mental and emotional and physical self-care. And there are so many skills and practices and tools that you can learn and integrate that can help you do that. And I can help you find a lot of those skills and practices, and you don't have to spend a dime. Here's the thing about working on yourself in the way that I'm talking about today, just working on yourself. All you have to do is get committed and approach it with a little reverence, a little discipline, a little dedication. I mean, this is your life after all, right? And then carve out a little bit of time. And if all you can do in the beginning is 5 minutes, well, it's 5 minutes that you weren't doing before. So any time that you can devote to yourself, and then you begin with the self introspection, right? The self reflection. And then you start to slowly choose some of these things that I've talked about today, explore them, research them a little bit, look into these and start to integrate them into your life. And so let me give you some ideas right now of ways you can get started without spending a dime, without joining a club, without hiring a guru or a coach, just things you can do on your own with small investments of time, but no investment of money. So you can go back through my YouTube videos for some ideas. In fact, I have a video on building resilience. So maybe you want to start there. I give 6 general ways that you can start building your own resilience. You also might want to go back through my videos and look for, or you can look in my playlists as well. But I have a video where I talk about adverse childhood experiences. I highly recommend that you go back and watch my video on adverse childhood experiences. They're called ACEs. I would also go back and look I have a video that I think it's called How Stressed Are You? And then there's a simple 10 question quiz you can take where you get kind of a self-assessment of where your stress levels are right now. So I would go back and look through some of that because those are things you can do. You can spend 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, and this will really set you on that path of self-assessment, self-reflection, self-discovery, and beginning to excavate some of these things. And listen, there's you can continue to go through your life on autopilot, just in survival mode, whatever is your version of survival mode. Your version of survival mode might look great. It might look great from the outside, but you know how you feel on the inside. You can go through your entire life like this. Or if you are feeling some of this that I've been describing in this video, you can pause in your life right now, give yourself a few minutes of time here and there, because if you'll begin to understand how these coping mechanisms became maladaptive in your adult life, you can change things. You can improve things. You can replace old, worn out habits that are no longer serving you with new, healthier habits that will serve you and help you carve out a life that you'll love, a life where you'll feel more empowered and happier, a life where you let people in, where you have healthy relationships, where you can set healthy boundaries, where you do accept care, you do accept help, you do trust people. I mean, we can change. We can absolutely change. It's not going to happen from the outside, though. Change like this happens from the inside. All right, so go back through my videos, and then if you want some more specific practices, some more specific information, you're welcome to go over to my online academy, Pause First Academy. I will throw up the website so you'll know where to go. Pause First Academy. And I have information over there and courses. I told you I've been doing this work for a very long time. I've been teaching stress reduction strategies and resilience practices and things like this professionally since 2011 full time. And I've worked with trauma exposed professionals for the past 7 or 8 years. So I have a lot of experience, and I have to work all this stuff on myself too, because, we all have stuff. So everything I talk about, everything I teach, everything I encourage you to do, I have done or I am doing myself as well. I'm a work in progress. I do know that right now, as you're listening to this, it won't always be this way, but there will always be something available over on Pause First Academy for free. Right now, I have a free meditation course that's called Demystifying Meditation and Mindfulness. So if you want to know a little bit more about those personal practices that are evidence-based and very powerful, go over and just grab that free course. I have a couple of free PDFs over there. The stress test that I talked about, that's available as a free downloadable printable PDF. I also have a warrior resource list over there that I created for the trauma exposed professionals that I work with, and that you can just go take a look at that. That's just loaded up with tons of stuff. Again, free, downloadable, printable resource list. And then also right now, I have my 21-day meditation jumpstart course is available for only $21. And that is 21 days. I teach you to meditate starting with 1 minute on day one and working all the way up to 21 days and 21 minutes. So if you take that free meditation class and you're like, hey, I kind of want to learn how to do this, then you might want to come back and consider that 21-day meditation jumpstart journal. There's a journal that goes along with it, but you don't need it because I also offer that within the course for free as a downloadable and printable PDF. So there are some ways you can get started. Scroll back through my YouTube videos. There's a free mini course on breathing. There's one on meditation. There's one on mindfulness. Just scroll through and see what appeals to you. And now let's start the wrap up. Okay, here comes the big finish. If you resonate with what I'm saying today, if you enjoyed this content, if you are looking for ways to feel better and be better and improve your self-care and build your resilience, then come hang out with me, man. Subscribe if you'd like to hang out with me and learn more. hit the bell if you'd like to be notified when I release new videos. Feel free to look through everything that I have. There's a ton of stuff for free. You never have to spend a dime, and there you can really get pretty far by just using the resources and the information and the content that I've provided so far. I hope you'll take today seriously. I hope this leads you to some introspection. I hope that you'll take a look inside and decide you're worth it and you'd like to make some changes and improvements. And this will be great for you and for your life and for your future. And I'll say just one more thing. If you have children, you can change the way you do things. Your children can watch you make those conscious changes, and then you'll be modeling healthy behavior for them, and you'll never regret that. I promise. All right, friend, you can reach out to me if you have any questions or you would like some more information or you're looking for resources. And all of my information, my contact information, everything you need to know about me, what I do, why I'm here, Paws First Academy, all that is in the description box below. You'll also find links over to Paws First Academy, and anything else that I have going on is in that description box below. So just drop in there if you want some more information. Thanks for being here today. I truly appreciate your time. I love doing these videos, and I will see you next time.